This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material. No copyright infringement is intended. So let's get started.
Good day everyone. Today we're gonna dive deep an important and complex topic, defining the term Global North and Global South. The concept of global divide has long been defining feature of international relationship, economics, politics, and societies worldwide. The North and the South divide represents economic and social disparities between wealthy Global North and less developed Global South. This divide stems from historical colonialism, unequal trade, debt, and globalization. While international initiatives aims to address these disparities, challenges persist due to the complexity and deeply rooted nature of the issues. This divide generally refers to economic and development gap between so-called Global North and Global South. The origin of this division and its development over time and its consequences on global relations continue to be significant areas of study. So this video actually examines the roots of global divide, the reasons behind the North and the South classification, the characteristics of each region and impact of this division in international affairs. Additionally, it explores the differences between the first, second, and the third world countries, between the third world and the global south, and how Latin America experiences contributed to the new global perspective. So the global divide can be traced back to colonialism and imperialism from 15th century onward. European power like Spain, Britain, France, and Portugal conquered and exploited regions in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This period saw the force of extraction resources, the position Western economic system of indigenous society.
What is the global divide? The gap in wealth, development, and opportunity between countries, often described as the global north versus global south, a result of historical, economic, and political factors. Historical roots of the divide: colonialism, resource extraction, explosion of local labor, slave trade and imperialism disrupted local development, colonizers grow wealthy, colonies remained underdeveloped. Post-colonial era independency. New nations gained independence in 1950s to 1970s, struggle with big economies, debt and lack of infrastructure, became dependent on foreign aid, loans, and multinational corporations. Globalization and widening gap, 1980s to 2000s, rapid globalization favored developed nations. Poorer countries face trade barriers, unfair agreements. Rich countries invested in technology and innovation. Poor countries are lagged behind. The digital emerges. Internet and tech boom mostly benefit global north.
The global divides the North and the South. The global North-South divide refers to a socio-economic and political separation between wealthy, industrialized nations, the global North, and less developed countries. The global South, characterized by disparities in wealth, income, political freedoms, and standards of living. The global North includes countries like US, Canada, Western Europe, and Japan, while the global South encompasses most of Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and parts of Asia. The division stems from historical factors like colonialism and unequal economic systems, and is addressed through international efforts, like those by the UN. Global North and Global South are terms that denote a method of grouping countries based on their defining characteristics with regard to socioeconomics and politics. According to UN Trade, the development of UNCTAD, the Global South broadly comprises Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. excluding Israel, Japan, and South Korea. The Oceania, excluding Australia and the New Zealand. Most of the Global South countries are commonly identified as lacking in their standards of living, which includes having lower incomes, high levels of poverty, high populations growth rates, inadequate housing, limited educational opportunities, and deficient health systems, among other issues. Additionally, these countries' cities are characterized by their poor infrastructure. Opposite of the Global South is the Global North, which the UNCTAD describes as broadly comprising Northern America and Europe, Israel, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Consequently, the two groups do not correspond to the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere. As many of the Global South's countries are geographically located in the North and vice versa. Economic classification of the world's countries and the territories by the UNCTAD in 2023, the Global North developed countries in the highlighted in the blue and the Global South. Developing countries and the list of developed countries is highlighted in red. More specifically, the Global North consists of the world's developed countries, whereas the Global South consists of the world's developing countries and less developed countries. The South classification, as used by governmental and developmental organizations, was first introduced as a more open and value-free alternative to Third World, and likewise potentially valuing terms and such as developed and developing countries of the Global South have also been described as a being newly industrialized or in the process of industrializing.
The difference between the Third World and Global South. They are often used to describe developing countries, but they differ significantly in their origins, meanings, and current usage. Third World. This term originated during the Cold War era 1950s to classify countries that were not aligned with either the Western Bloc, led by the United States, or the First World. Global South. This is a more modern and neutral term that became widely used in the post-Cold War period. It refers broadly to countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and parts of Oceania that share common challenges related to development, economic inequality, and the legacy of colonialism. Third World is now considered politically and socially outdated, as it oversimplifies complex issues and implies a global hierarchy. The Global South is viewed as a more respectful and accurate term, highlighting structural inequalities in the global system, such as trade imbalances, access to technology, and development opportunities.
Latin American countries experience poverty and tyranny since time immemorial. It is said that they are remain underdeveloped since they are not pursuing the right economic policies or their government are corrupt and authoritarian. Thus, notable Latin American scholars sought to explain persistent levels of the underdevelopment in Latin America by situating national economies within their global economic context. It goes under the name of dependency theory. In this theory, it describes that Latin America is not developing because of the global stratification in which a product of colonialism. During the day of industrial revolution in the West, colonialization of the South led to the colonial pattern of the North-South trade, which is still present today. After decolonization, there are still importances between the developed and less developed countries, which mainly consistent in the exploitation of peripheral natural resources and workforce by the center. Latin American dependency theory is a strand of political economic thought that developed of the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean shortly after World War II. Dependency theory argues that underdevelopment as experienced in Latin America and elsewhere is the direct result of capital intervention rather than a condition of lacking development or investment.
by American sociologist Immanuel Wallerstein. The term core nations and peripheral nations are the heart of dependency theory. Core countries, more industrialized nations who receive the majority of the world's wealth. The manufacturing based on the planet where resources funnel into become the technology and wealth enjoyed by the Western world today. Peripheral nations, countries that are less developed and receive unequal distribution of the world's wealth. Natural resources and labor support the wealthier countries. The dependency theory describes a vicious cycle that infers a hierarchy of nations across the globe. The core dependent upon the periphery insofar as the raw materials and cheap labor are concerned. On the other hand, the periphery is also dependent upon the core insofar as trade and economic aid are concerned.